So, let's dive into one of the most incredible transformations in modern history. We're talking about how World War II took a quiet, stay-at-home America and basically threw it onto the world stage, turning it into a superpower. This is the story of how a massive global conflict didn't just reshape the world, it completely remade the United States from the inside out.
Take a look at this cartoon. It's from the late 1930s, and it just nails the American attitude at the time. You've got Europe over there, sick with the fever of war, and then you've got Uncle Sam, all tucked in, breathing a sigh of relief because there's a huge ocean in between. But here's the real question it's asking. Can you really stay safe in your own bed when the whole house is on fire? That was the big dilemma facing America.
You see, after the absolute trauma of World War I, America's game plan was pretty simple. Let's just stay out of it. The idea was to build a wall of policy, hide behind two giant oceans, and just hope all the world's problems would leave them alone.
And this whole idea had a name, isolationism. It's exactly what it sounds like. The thinking was, America should focus on America, period. Those massive oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, they weren't just water. They were seen as these giant protective moats that could keep the country safe from getting tangled up in foreign messes.
Now, this wasn't just some popular feeling. It was literally the law. Congress passed a whole series of Neutrality Acts designed to legislate the U.S. out of any future wars. The cash and carry policy is a perfect example of this mindset. It basically said, sure, you can buy our non-military stuff, but you have to pay in cold, hard cash, and you have to haul it away in your own ships. No American ships, no American loans, and hopefully no American risk.
But you know, walls can't hold back the tide of history forever. As the world crept closer and closer to all-out war, those policy walls started to get some serious cracks. America was about to become something it really didn't want to be, a reluctant arsenal.
You can just watch the slow-motion erosion of isolationism right here. It starts with this really strict, hands-off neutrality. Then it softens a little to cash and carry. But the real game changer, that was the Lend-Lease Act. President Roosevelt put it in this really simple way. He said, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't haggle over the price of your garden hose. You just lend it to them. Suddenly, the U.S. was supplying the Allies, becoming the arsenal of democracy, all while technically, officially staying out of the fight.
Well, that whole debate about whether to lend a hose or just stay inside and lock the door, it ended, abruptly. One single event completely shattered America's illusion of safety and plunged the nation right into the middle of the fire.
This is the date that changed absolutely everything. A normal, quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii became the exact moment that would redefine America's place in the world for the next 100 years.
With just these few words, President Roosevelt captured the shock, the outrage, and the grief of an entire nation. The attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't just an act of war. No, it was seen as this profound betrayal, a sneak attack that managed to unite a very divided country, literally overnight.
The numbers alone are just devastating. It was a massive military blow, but the psychological shock? That was even bigger. All of a sudden, those giant oceans didn't feel like a barrier anymore. The war had come home, and American isolationism was left in ruins on a single Sunday morning.
So, America was in. And this wasn't going to be some far-off conflict fought only by soldiers. Oh no, this was the beginning of a total war, a national mobilization that would reach into and change the life of every single American.
The war effort demanded huge sacrifices from everyone, especially on the home front. Rationing just became a part of life. Just imagine needing a government-issued coupon to buy gasoline or coffee or even a new pair of shoes. It's wild to think about. Entire industries just stopped making things like cars and refrigerators and switched over to making tanks and planes.
So, with millions of men heading overseas to fight, who was going to build all this stuff? Well, that's where Rosie the Riveter comes in. She became this incredible icon for the millions of women who stepped into factories and shipyards doing jobs they'd never been allowed to do before. And this wasn't just some temporary fix. It was a huge social revolution that really planted the seeds for the future of the women's rights movement.
And the effort wasn't just happening in factories. It was happening in people's own backyards. Victory gardens started popping up everywhere. City rooftops, public parks, suburban lawns. On the one hand, it was a really practical way to help the war effort by easing the strain on the food supply. But it was also a massive morale booster. It made everyone feel like they were a part of the fight.
Okay, so how do you even begin to pay for a war this massive?
Well, it came down to everyone, and I mean everyone. The government massively expanded the income tax, and there were these huge patriotic campaigns encouraging everybody to buy war bonds. The goal was for people to put at least 10% of every single paycheck into these bonds. This was about more than just money. It was about personally investing in victory.
But, and this is a really big but, this time of incredible unity and sacrifice had a very dark side. The immense pressure of the war created this awful clash between national security and the civil liberties of America's own citizens.
Citing fears of espionage and sabotage on the West Coast, President Roosevelt signed what's known as Executive Order 9066. This single order authorized the forced removal and imprisonment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans. The vast majority of them were American citizens.
You know, official documents can sound so cold and distant. But then you read something like this, a single entry from Casanoda's diary, and it just brings the devastating human reality crashing down. This is what was behind that order. Families ripped from their homes, their lives totally shattered, forced into these desolate camps, all because of fear and prejudice.
Well, of course, this was challenged. A man named Fred Korematsu, an American citizen, argued that this was a clear violation of his constitutional rights. He took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, but the court sided with the government. The ruling essentially was that during a time of war, military necessity could outweigh an individual's rights. It's still one of the most controversial decisions in the court's entire history.
So as the war finally started to draw to a close, it was crystal clear that the world and America's role in it had been changed, fundamentally and forever. Even after victory in Europe, the war in the Pacific was still raging, with just brutal intensity. The end, when it came, was terrifyingly fast, and it threw the entire world into the atomic age. In the span of just a few weeks, 2 atomic bombs were dropped, Japan surrendered, and the deadliest conflict in all of human history was over.
But the end of one war just set the stage for the next one. With the old European empires completely shattered, there was this massive power vacuum. And 2 nations were left standing as global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These countries had been allies, but now, with their completely opposing ideologies, they were on a collision course for a totally new kind of conflict, the Cold War.
And Winston Churchill found the perfect, haunting words for this new reality. He said, "An iron curtain has descended across the continent." It just painted this vivid picture of a world split in two. For America, the transformation was complete. There was no going back to isolationism. It was now the reluctant leader of the free world, locked in a global standoff that would define the next 50 years.
Which leaves us with one of the heaviest, most difficult questions of the entire 20th century. Using the atomic bomb absolutely ended the war. It likely prevented an invasion of Japan that would have cost countless more lives on both sides. But it did so at a truly horrific human cost. So was it a military necessity, or was it a moral catastrophe? That's a question historians and all of us are still grappling with today. Thanks for joining me.